Hello and welcome to EE 447. I'm your instructor, Gregory Myers. In this video, we're going to start another series on how to use your HTML page, your static HTML page, to connect to resources outside of your page. This may be a resource, for instance, that is another file on your file system. It may be another website. I'm going to leave this topic fairly generic because I want to sort of lump multiple items in this thread, including, for instance, the ability to send an email or at least initiate through a mail client an email, as well as embedding an external image. And finally, we're going to finish this one up with embedding a YouTube video and doing that two different ways. So to begin with, you want to, like in prior videos, you want to go to File, New File, and want to create an HTML page. And for this particular example, we're going to go ahead and save it in the same location that we've been saving the other ones in our demos HTML. In this particular case, though, what I want to call this one is example underscore external underscore 01. Once again, I'm trying to lump a bunch of examples together in one that hopefully will sort of all have somewhat of the same theme. And so we're going to call this, or we're going to title this one example underscore external underscore 01. Okay, so we're not going to do much with styles in this particular one. As a matter of fact, instead what we're going to do is we're going to work solely with the attributes of the tags. And I'm going to keep this one fairly generic. I'm just going to use a paragraph within the body and basically just throw a bunch of links together, kind of little disconnected links together, but all within the same paragraph, just simply using the line break to delineate between them. So we're going to start off with a p tag. That's just to give us some room here. And so for the first example that I want us to do then is we simply want to define a hyperlink. So in this particular example here, we're going to define a hyperlink. And we're going to do this two different ways. I'm going to go ahead and insert a line break here. The first one is going to be a local resource. And then the second one is going to be a remote resource, meaning that one is going to be sitting on your file system and the other is not. Okay, we'll play around with this to work with the aesthetics a little bit. I'm looking for function rather than form on this particular one. So this is going to be rather a pretty crude example. And so to begin with, what we want to do is we want to look at the A tag, which then allows for us to specify a reference to a resource. In this case, we're looking at something local. And so we automatically in Visual Studio, we see all of the files that are local to that directory, including if you select pick URL, you'll see even the text files that are in that directory. All right. So we're going to focus for this in the beginning right now, we're going to focus just on other HTML pages. And so if you take a look, this is our assortment of files in the HTML folder. And it doesn't really matter which one you pick. The main thing to note, though, is that it is in the local directory. And obviously, you do not want to pick the same file that you're currently working on. Instead, let's just pick this example paragraph underscore 01.html. You close the tag, and then in between the open and close tags, you put the human readable description. In other words, what you want the user of your website to see. And so this can be text, a significant amount of text, or just a short a single word. So for instance, I could just simply say example 01. If I save this, you'll see that I now have a URL or a hyperlink to a URI. I'm going to go ahead and take a second and put another line break here. As a matter of fact, I'm probably just going to go ahead and stick 2 of them in there just to get these well away from each other so we can see the different examples. Probably would be better to be a little more descriptive on this one rather than saying example of 1. How about if we just call this one sample paragraph? And since this is the text in between the tags is just regular text that's going to be read, you can have spaces. We'll work on how to put spaces in our references, but for right now, let's just try to avoid spaces in our file names or any extra weird characters in our file names. And once again, you can play around with this. Perhaps you decide that you would think it looks better by eliminating the first line break, in which case now we can shift it up to the same line, and then you can see local resource. A good example would be the sample paragraph. Now, for the remote resource, it's very, very similar. I'm going to go ahead and eliminate the line break there. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and add another href tag, a tag with href. And in this case, I want to pick a URL. Does not want to be local. I don't want it to be local, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select www.uab.edu, and you can also specify the protocol in front of it. So in this case, I can specify HTTPS. That will ensure that we actually have a secure connection. And then close the tag. And in this case, then for the human readable part or the visible part, we can type in www.uab.edu, or what we can do, it doesn't have to be the URL, it can just simply, or excuse me, the address of the website. Instead, what it can be is be something just like this: in University of Alabama at Birmingham. Okay, and so now you can see that we have a URL that will ultimately take us to UAB's main website, and we'll check that in just a minute. I'm going to follow this up with a couple more line breaks, just so that we've got a little more room to work for the next example. The spaces on line 12 and line 14 are not parsed by your browser. They're essentially ignored, so they don't add or detract from the results or the view of your web page. It's more just for the humans. I would encourage you to keep nice tabbing just because it makes your HTML code a little easier to work with. So continuing on with this, I'd like to contrast a couple of examples. I want to add another attribute here under the href. I'd also like to add target. And so for my target options, I want to compare blank, parent, and self. So we're going to start off with the blank. And I'm actually going to reproduce this now several times, with each one of these examples just differing by what the target is going to be. So we're going to start off with the first one being blank. And what I'm doing is I'm changing the text that we're going to see, not what the URL is. So in other words, not the href, but I'm going to change the text. And I'm also going to change the target to look at the 3 options here. And so this one we want to be underscore parent. And then lastly, the third example, the self. All right, so we save this, and now you see that we've actually got multiple examples. Tell you what, just for aesthetics purposes, I'm going to go ahead and kill off this second BR tag. You don't have to worry about that. Just mainly just want to make it look reasonably good. We're not going to spend a lot of time with the formatting on this one. Now, what I want to do is I actually want to see this in my web browser. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to open my web browser. I already had it up for one of my next examples. That's for the HTML image tag. And then let me go find the HTML page that I'm working on. That's going to be the external of 1. And so you can see there's our sample paragraph, which is correctly hyperlinked. This is from a prior video showing you the different tags for the different types of text, including italic and strong. And then now if we select the first URL that specifies the target as blank, you'll notice that it is actually opening in a separate tab. Okay. The second one reuses the existing tab. And then the third one does as well. All right. We'll come back to the top later on. All right, so let's go back now to Visual Studio or whatever IDE you might be using. And we want to look at one other way that you can sort of think of being able to connect to the outside world. I'm going to add my BR tag back here, my line break. And now what I want to look at then is using the same href. I instead want to open up my mail client with a specific email address. And so use a href or a tag to open your mail client. All right, now to be specific, we're not actually sending an email. This is not, your web browser is not sending the email, it's just facilitating opening it up. You can sort of think of that as sometimes the contact button on a website. And so what we do is we still, so we're going to call this one start an email. And I'm going to include with subject because I always think that's a nice feature. And so to do that, once again, we use an a tag with href. And in this particular case now, what we need to do is we need to specify that we are going to use the mail to. In other words, we want it to href to open up, using that protocol, open up your client. In this particular case, we want to email me. So it's gmyers@uab.edu. And then we also want to take the additional step of specifying the subject. And you separate the mail address with the subject by a question mark. And so in this case, it's going to be subject equal to EE447. Now, I intentionally don't have any spaces in this because I don't want us to worry about that right now. Close your tag. And then send email is going to be the text that the user sees. You save that. And then let's go out here to our web browser and refresh one more time. You should now see another hyperlink. And if you hover over it, you'll actually see down the bottom the mail to instructions. You click on that, and it's going to take me a second. It's going to open up my Outlook that's already configured as my default mail client. And if you notice, it's already pre-populated the to field as well as the subject field. Now we aren't going to bother to send an email right now, so I'm just going to go and close this. Instead, what we want to do is we want to take a look at another way to communicate, if you would, with the outside world, or at least utilize the outside world. And that is we may want to embed things into our HTML page. So we've sort of already embedded hyperlinks using the href, href, and we're going to continue that now. You can embed web resources, but you can also embed local file resources such as images, as well as files. And so what we want to do is use an a tag, I suppose. How about if we do it this way, use an a tag to download a file. Okay. And for this one, the procedure is not too terribly different between being a remote or a local resource. So I'm only going to do this one once. Once again, I download a file, starts off with an A tag with href equal to, and then now we have to specify the URL. And Visual Studio is trying to be helpful here by eliminating only the HTML, or showing only the HTML files. I want to go ahead and download the file that was associated with this example paragraph_01. I have a text file that you can sort of think of as a little cheat sheet, if you would, to remember what tags you're supposed to be working with. And so you can go ahead and select that, click OK, and we have a couple of options here. We can display it in the web browser, in which case this would display the file. If we left it like this, so we're going to change this first one to display a file. Or what we can do is we can make one little change here by adding one other attribute, and that is going to be the target. Oh, sorry, 1 second here. Let me make sure I've got it in the right location. And so you differentiate between the two by specifying the download attribute. And so in the second example, we want to download a file as opposed to display the file. Now, please note that this behavior is not universally consistent. Matter of fact, if you go to the W3 Schools documentation, it emphasizes under the try it yourself example, the download attribute is not supported in all browsers, and also there are restrictions on cross-site communication. All right, I'm going to go ahead to finish out this particular part of the example. I'm going to go add another line break, and then this brings us then to the last example that we want to work with, the last two examples. One is going to be with an image, and the second is going to be of embedding a video. So we've seen how to connect to remote resources using an A tag. Now what we want to use is use an IMG tag to display an image. So use an IMG tag to display an image. So the first thing that you will need to have to make this example work is a JPEG, bitmap, and a number of supported image types. I'm going to be working with a JPEG here that I took with my phone to give myself a profile picture. And so to begin with here, what we want to do is we want to specify simply an IMG tag. We want to specify for the attributes, the source. That's going to be the one I'm going to commonly misspell because I want to type it out, and it's SRC. Now, before we go any further, I do want to take a second to point out a little bit about my file structure. So we've worked with subfolders already, but if you notice in my demos HTML folder, I don't have any images. And instead, what I've done is I've created another subfolder called images, and in there I have a couple of profile pictures. One called profile_01.jpg. And so what we want to do is we want to figure out how to navigate back one folder in the file system. And do that, we use the double dot followed by the slash, and we specify the images folder, which is in parallel with our HTML folder. So it's very important that you notice that the two folders are essentially side by side. So our HTML file resides in the HTML folder. We want to go up one directory to our demos and then down one directory into our images folder. And we want to specify our profile_01.jpg. Some additional attributes that you can include are things like the size. If you don't do that, then it's just going to default to the resolution of the image. your browser is going to attempt to do its best job of displaying it, maybe far larger than you'd intended. And so for this particular picture, I think I'm just going to leave it at 100 pixels, and the width is going to be 100 pixels as well. It would be useful for me to take a second to figure out exactly what the aspect ratio is on the image so that we can maintain that. We'll do that in just a second once we take a look at the results. And then the other one that you want to specify is going to be the alt tag, which is going to display if the image is not found. So I'm just going to call this one my profile picture. And all right, and so let's go out here to our web browser real quick. Appears as if I have accidentally closed my page that I was working on. Let's go back here and open it back up. And I'm not really sure why Visual Studio decided to rotate my image there. Either that or it was just trying to work with the aspect ratio. We do want to take just a second, figure out what a better ratio would be, or a better height and width would be. So let me take a second on this image to just figure out real quick what the size is. So I'm going to make it 232 is going to be the width, and 309 is going to be the height. So basically just dividing by 10 here. So 309 and 232, just to keep it simple. And let's see if that improves it a little bit. Still not sure why Visual Studio is doing that, unless did I swap it? Let's make sure of that. So the width is 232 and the height is 309. I'll take a look at that and figure out exactly what's going on there. That's clearly not the intention, but there you go. Probably larger than you would have ever preferred to see me. But there is how you can inject a profile picture into a web page. All right, let's take a look at one final example here. I'm going to go ahead and add a couple more line breaks here. And then for the last one, we are going to embed a video. The first way that we're going to do it is we're going to do it kind of like we've already done it. And that is going to be using a URL. And to do so, it's just going to be what we've already seen, a tag with an href equal to, I'm going to go ahead and close the tag, go and set this up. And for our example for this, I've actually picked a video off of the W3 Schools account. And I'm just going to simply copy the URL. And I'm going to come back to Visual Studio. And under the href, I'm just going to paste that URL. And then as far as the human viewable text friendly stuff, why don't we just grab the title of the video. And so we'll paste that in here. So that's one way to do it. Okay, I'm going to follow this one up with a line break. And so that one's not too unexpected. The second way to go about doing it is, you've probably noticed there's the share feature on YouTube. And so one of the options is to select embed. And what YouTube does for you, and a number of sites do this, is that it crafts the URL that you need, in this case using an iframe, that will allow for you to embed a YouTube viewer. And so you can go ahead and just copy this text. You can come back now to Visual Studio, and we're going to call this using a viewer. And in this case, since we're already inside of a /p tag, we can just simply paste that long snip of HTML And there's our iframe. We can take a look at it. It's got some attributes in it, some of which make perfect sense, the width and the height, as well as the source. And if you notice, the source is actually the same as the one that we just copied manually from the browser, as well as some other additional attributes, including frame border and allow full screen. You can choose to turn some of these on or off. This is also in some of the YouTube documentation as well as in the iframe documentation. Let's go ahead and save it. Visual Studio doesn't like that extremely well. It seems to like that about as well as it liked my profile picture. And so what you can do now is go back to your browser, go ahead and close this out, and go back to our example underscore external underscore 01 and refresh it. Now, there you go. You have not only the hyperlink in the first example, but we also have the ability to embed a viewer within your web page, and you can go ahead and hit play. And I encourage you to listen to this video at some point as well. Notice that you get all the features of the YouTube player, including being able to go to YouTube, watching it on YouTube, as well as full screen, and so on. And you can limit this, including also limiting what people see as far as related videos when the video completes. All right, well, that's all I have for this particular example. As always, if you have any questions or suggestions, don't hesitate to let me know. I hope you've found this video helpful. Thank you very much.